Oi, gente, tudo bom? Bem-vindo ao Brazil! Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Schnarr, and I will be your discussion leader this week for our discussion on how we speak in many tongues. All right, let's get started. What are we discussing this week? This week, we will be discussing multilingual education in the United States, dialects of English spoken in the United States, and languages spoken in the United States. I clarified by saying in the United States because our readings this week, as well as our videos, focus on just the United States. All right, so let's begin. Multilingual in education in the United States has gone through several phases. It's something that's best viewed as a timeline. Language began as being seen as language as problem, something that needed to be corrected. The earliest response to vernacular use was to try to eradicate it. In order to advance an eradicationist agenda, vernaculars have been considered as inherently wrong language, inferior to standard language, or at best, bastardized versions of the same. Whew. And antithetical to educational success and social mobility. Wow, that's terrible. The author goes on, Nero, our author goes on to describe how the African American community, as well as the Appalachian English, Hawaiian Creole, Jamaican Creole, and West African Pidgin English were affected through their own cultures and the stories of their cultures to this period in time, when language is seen as a problem whenever it was very distant from standard English. Beginning in 1953, there was a publication made by UNESCO called The Use of Vernacular Language in English. And after this publication, there was a more humanistic approach taken to educating kids in their own language. It became seen as something that needed to be done. It was their right to be able to use their language and continue the study of their language in the United States in the classroom. Other legislation was passed that helped further this movement. In 1965, the passage of the Hart-Celler Immigration Act raised the quotas for legal immigration to the United States from Mexico, the Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Wow. After they had just taken these steps in 1953 to acknowledge that language was seen as a right, they found themselves with a large influx of different languages and dialects of English, and problems arose. Further legislation passed was the Bilingual Education Act of 1968 during the Civil Rights Movement, as well as a resolution passed called Students' Right to Their Own Language, which was passed by the Conference on College Composition and Communication. These efforts helped create the movement that basically encouraged that language was a right and not a problem. Of course, eventually we have evolved. We've become a society that's moving towards knowing that language is a right, but it's also, even more importantly, a resource. Language as resource is the new way of thinking. We've adopted things such as the contrastive approach to education, where we compare and contrast the language of our mother tongue compared to standard English to help ourselves make those connections as well as to find the differences between the two. This has developed the theory and that most of us are familiar with, which is called code switching. I honestly don't think there's a person out there that doesn't know how to code switch. I think it's important whether you're bilingual or you're bidialectal. You have to know when to speak in which way when you're around which communities. I think that that's the America that we're beginning to live in. All right, let's move on. Dialects of English spoken in the United States. Below I've found a map that was published in 2013 by the Business Insider magazine. And they described how there's 24 dialects found in the United States of English. Now, the American Tongues video introduced us to varying dialects all across the United States and how they interact with each other. Language is directly tied to your community. We learn to talk the same way we learn our customs and beliefs from the community in which we live. How do we engage dialects different from our own in everyday life as global citizens and global thinkers, as educators, is really the next question. Another thing to discuss this week is that languages spoken in the United States have increased exponentially. This past census, which was 2015, more than 350 languages were recorded as being spoken in the United States. Below I found a graph that goes through the number of languages spoken in the United States in the 15 largest metro areas. Close to the middle, you can see Houston. Houston had 145 languages recorded as being spoken in the Houston area. 37% of people over the age of 5 in the Houston area speak a language other than English at home. Even the smallest community, which speaks Tamil, a language from Sri Lanka and India, is still represented by 4,690 speakers. Wow. This really puts into perspective what happened whenever Hart-Celler immigration occurred. That law made the idea and the concept of developing speakers that are bidialectal and bilingual even more present in our society. So the video Speaking in Tongues addressed this issue. They talked about people who are speaking in several different languages and attending schools that have two-way bilingual immersion programs. I have experience with these sorts of programs in the Houston ISD community. The current two-way bilingual immersion programs available in Houston are Mandarin, Chinese, Arabic, French, and Spanish. Wow, fun facts. So the questions become the same that were raised in Speaking in Tongues. Where are we getting the resources to be able to have these programs? Are we meeting the state standards of instruction, as well as how are these students doing on their assessments, state standardized assessments? And of course, is there community support for these programs? These are challenges and accomplishments that are seen whenever you dive into the world of two-way bilingual immersion programs. So what questions can further our discussion this week? Elbow reminds us that standard written English is no one's mother tongue, that all students must make a linguistic leap to learn it in school. Which linguistic groups have you been exposed to personally or professionally, and how has this affected the way you learn to write yourself? Or how have you seen it affect the way your students learn to write in English? Our second question. In the documentary, Speaking in Tongues, we meet several students who have been attending two-way bilingual immersion programs. These are becoming increasingly more available throughout the United States. What experiences and connections have you had with two-way bilingual education programs personally or professionally? What do you think the biggest challenge is that these programs face? And what do you think the biggest reward is that these programs produce for their respective communities? Guys, I'm so excited to be your discussion leader this week and to delve into these issues further. I hope you all have a wonderful start to your week, and I look forward to seeing you on the discussion board soon. Ciao, gente!